Sabrina the Animated Series, Episode 41. I get to see Quigley terrified, even if it's from the forced concept of Hilda driving too fast like in a 70s comic, even though a witch would make herself an expert at driving. She says she somehow thinks she's getting the hang of driving. Why do we have to see her cause damage? You might not get the idea that she used magic to fix that damage. There's no reason she would think he isn't scared. She has to be just saying that to mock him. This has the same problem as that shitty Jetsons episode, though at least no one's joking that all women are bad drivers. She'd know how to drive by now. Women have been allowed to drive for decades and she's 600 years old. And if she wasn't driving all the time because she could just warp or fly, she would just do that. Not want to drive a car when Quigley has no actual power over her. I can assume this makes sense because she's knowingly torturing him, though. There's no way Sabrina would assume Hilda's not that bad at driving. And it's not like she just met Hilda. Why would she not believe Quigley when she'd inevitably hear him complain about Hilda's driving? Sabrina wants Hilda to become good at driving because then she could drive her around, even though she still has Quigley to drive her around. So I guess she assumes Quigley's very stingy with driving people around because he'd rather do housework all day. She could just fly on a broom to get where she wants. He wouldn't know. And that happened in the comic. I like seeing Quigley trip. It's good that it doesn't guilt trip us by having be injured the whole episode from it. Hilda gets reassured by Zelda when she whines about failing. And I guess they're just too scared of Quigley to use a get good at driving spell. It makes sense that she'd want to actually get good at driving for the sake of her own pride. Why'd she go into Spooky again when she wasn't prompted to do so, when he always betrays her? And basically every spell he does is something a witch has done at some point, so it's not like he's more powerful than them. He at least suffers from some embarrassment because he can't rhyme something with orange, but he should have known better. But since he even warns people his spells are gonna backfire, why do they still trust him instead of immediately changing their minds? Sabrina throws a stake to keep dogs from chasing Salem anymore. Why did one of the dogs not go after the stake? Why isn't Salem using magic to protect himself? Salem asks if she's sure the transformation is complete. Why didn't they just summon a person by pointing instead of thinking they have to transform an already living being? He says what's he doing by that fire hydrant if the transformation is complete? How would he still act like a dog when he has a human brain now? It'd be forced if he never acted like a dog again then. I like seeing Hilda wear that thing on her head, even if no one ever does that because they're doing housework. And finally, the show does show off the aunt's boy craziness, which was apparently flanderized in the comic. I know she'll never stay with the guy the rest of the show, so it wastes my time. At least I get to see Sabrina and Salem levitating. If they're so confident in using their own magic frivolously, why even go to Spooky? Then the driving teacher flirts with Zelda and goes off with her, and I get to enjoy cookies. Her tire pumps. He says he'll teach her to change a flat. Sadly, I don't get to see that because the episode cuts past Zelda doing that. And Zelda's flowers get ruined. Ed isn't dating Zelda. She also freezes Zelda, so good thing she can still melt it just by force of will. If a witch doesn't need to even move to use magic, why didn't they get themselves free of the ropes earlier? And then we see the ants get shapeshifted a bunch. The house gets split in two so that each ant could have her own half, which rips off the sitcom. And Sabrina almost falls and gets killed, and Salem saves her. Her ants won't keep that crack there because they don't want her dead. And Zelda's supposed to be the responsible one. Sabrina says she'll have to get rid of Ed. Then why doesn't she just point to do it? Sabrina thinks her aunts would split her in half if she told them she created Ed, which she'd have to do to console them after they'd be upset that he vanished and file a missing persons report for him. It's always annoying to see the ants bicker, and pointless. Zelda creates fire on the table. She calls an operator wanting the number of the Department of Motor Vehicles, and makes a DMV call and says she wants to uncancel her driving test. Won't the guy know it's not Hilda? I guess he assumes that Hilda's voice sounds different over the phone, if he even recognizes Hilda's voice. Wouldn't he expect some ID? If she can disguise herself as Hilda, complete with getting her voice, Why didn't she get Rin to do that before she made the call? She goes off with Ed, and Sabrina hugs Hilda. Hilda gets a normal driving lesson, and now she's driving normally. He says casually that he sees someone on a flying vacuum behind him, and then he looks mildly confused by it. Hilda uses magic to knock down the trees rather than her just turning Zelda to stone for the time being. She uses magic repeatedly, making it rain frogs. This is entertaining to see. It's little Sabrina style, where the witches don't even care about revealing magic to people. After all, everyone assumes they're dreaming anyways. I guess the teacher's laughing to reassure himself because he thinks he started dreaming. No one ever questions the idea that they started dreaming when they won't remember going to bed that day. No one ever freaks out that they fainted. Hilda drives so fast her car starts flying. At least she gives herself a helmet. Why is she pulling him up manually when she used magic so much? She could warp him back to his seat. She would think to do that. And it'd be fine if she said, "Oh no, I'm out of magic." Sabrina takes the wheel, having warped to it. A car scares people a bunch of times because sadism is the humor of the show. The teacher thinks he's losing his mind when he could have assumed this was just a dream the whole time. That'd be the more likely assumption. I mean, how is he not freaking out a lot more before then? Eventually a marshmallow gets summoned to give them a soft landing to stop the car, because that was all she could think about in a panic. Zelda gets her real appearance revealed. The teacher acts happy to reassure himself and gives her a license. Sure, it would be dark if it's not explained that he goes back to normal after this, instead of permanently going crazy. Smartly, Quigley says she's not driving his car until she really learns. She only started not driving well because she was protecting herself from her sister. You'd think she would at least try to explain that, even if she thinks she won't be believed about it. Zelda asks Hilda if she can ever forgive her. But then Hilda goes from forgiving her to continuing to say Ed likes her best. Ed can't really choose which one he likes the best. He says he'll teach Sabrina to drive when he gets conjured up by her again. And inexplicably he turns back into a dog and runs after Salem. How did he know that the spell would be temporary? I have to assume it makes sense because Spooky's spell was intentionally temporary out of sadism. But if he's sadistic, why did he make it so that he'd be fine with being very temporary? This episode is about Sabrina's aunts feuding with each other over a driving teacher for Hilda, who is inexplicably a dog Sabrina turned to Spooky of all people to shapeshift for her when she can summon anything. Well, it is another episode about demonizing magic. I feel like I'd be lying if I said I didn't appreciate this episode, because it has magic happen in it so often that it's entertaining to watch. Especially when Hilda chases Zelda when she's driving. And so many different things happen. It's entertaining to see the ants feud, but its flanderizations have it happen too often when it was rare in the 70s comic. It just goes to show me the show can only be good when Sabrina's not the focus. Someone would have used magic to make her a good driver, so the plot wouldn't have happened. Sabrina the Animated Series, Episode 42. Sabrina's wearing a shark head while giving a report in biology class. There's no way that happened. I don't remember that. She says she never knew biology could be so interesting. It sure is convenient that they didn't laugh at her immediately, and that she thought that wouldn't happen. Then she's trapped in the mask, and somehow the teacher ignores her instead of helping her. At least no one's mocking her when she keeps bumping into things. Chloe reveals that it's not Sabrina the students were fawning over. Sabrina reassures her that he'll pick them for being the best students. Quigley loses his temper with holding a camera, and I like that when the ants see him he's embarrassed. The camera also takes a picture of him, and he can't see and embarrasses himself. Finally, the show shows off his obsession with taking care of plants. Apparently it was flanderized in the comic, which is good because that's more interesting than it being a houseworker. Then he somehow gets himself tied up with black film, and Hilda saves him, making him dizzy. Sabrina smartly asks to borrow the camera and he agrees. Zelda says she never knows who the teacher might pick because mortals can be unpredictable. Why does she think witches aren't? Somehow she keeps gasping over and over because people other than her are picked when she would have known how unlikely it'd be that she'd be the one picked right after Chloe. She takes too long whining to Salem that she wasn't picked. He summons a card, and she says he's usually full of bad advice and lampshades him referring her to someone else. Just have Zelda be the one who refers her to someone else. There's no excuse for ever taking his advice again then. She goes from deciding not to use the card to being talked to and deciding to say the spell. So she has to suffer from a blizzard without winter clothes. Salem should have given her some. You'd think she'd suffer some ill effects in all that time. I guess she cast a heat spell without even knowing it. If the card was meant to get her access to the wise warlock, there's no reason she'd have to take so long getting to him. There's no reason the warlock would waste all day levitating and humming. It doesn't look like he has any television, but we haven't been shown that he doesn't. We haven't been shown that he does do that all day. He then says he's in pain and tells her to move his legs and asks how people sit like this, since he's old. Based on his unnecessary accent, I hope he's not portrayed in an offensive way. Because in a vacuum, the accent gives him charm. Much needed charm for a stereotypical wise man sage. I would have been wondering why I was expected to take a character completely seriously in this show. I think what annoys me is that it seems like he's only being given this accent because they think it's funny. He somehow already knows she's got a broken heart and expects her to walk away to a gift shop. Why does he expect her to leave? Of course she already knew what was wrong and came for a cure. He says he'll tell her what to do and expects her to go on a quest when he could just point to solve her problem. He says she has to find a person who never had her heart broken and then she'll get her cure from him. I think he doesn't even plan to give her anything. He can't show her with a screen someone who never had a heartbreak. She says he'd go with her if he really wanted to help her, so he agrees to help her. I like that she's become cynical as a realistic consequence of Salem and Spooky always leading her wrong, betraying her. How else can she become smart? He says he'll lay a curse on Slugloaf, so it's too bad he won't. Sabrina brings Jem to the closet, and somehow he says she didn't have to kill her. And she says she didn't kill her, she just froze her in time. Then I have to assume she didn't know she could do this until now, because this could have come in handy. She gets to use the TV screen on her chest to get herself to see a memory. She sees that her parents were telling an audience all of the gifts they gave her. I assume it's just so that they can show off their wealth in front of people, because if they liked her, they wouldn't send her to boarding school. Jem whines that she got the wrong ice cream flavor. I expected real heartbreak because her parents are abusive. The story would have been less confusing if they said disappointment instead of heartbreak. I thought now it'd be explained that her parents went to Guam without her. Then he shows her a memory of Harvey's. I always knew his lesson to Sabrina was meant to be that everyone suffered, except people who never got to really live a life because they died right away. Harvey gets shown playing an arcade machine for too long. And the janitor goes from telling him to give up to giving up and cleaning anyways. Somehow he doesn't lift the wire before vacuuming, despite not being blind, so the machine gets unplugged and he can't save his high score. It's the 2000s and he's still playing at an arcade. This has to be an alternate universe where arcades aren't going out of business outside Japan. Sabrina says Quigley's too sensible to let heartbreak happen to him. What kind of line is that? That's victim blaming. How is an anti-witch bigot sensible? If he could make a wish to get rid of Sabrina's powers, he would. Sabrina has to know that she didn't get picked because she didn't have good enough grades, and so that didn't make her sensible. Otherwise, it'd be hypocritical of her to say that you have to be nonsensible to get heartbroken. What was nonsensible about Harvey refusing to leave the arcade? And Jem would have been disappointed no matter how sensible she was. She had no control over which flavor of ice cream she got. I'm continuing to question this because the story might have actually agreed with her. Quigley's plant grows when he's busy talking on the phone and it dies. And he cries because he missed the one moment he had to take a picture of it. Only a magic plant would be like this. I like the idea that he's at least open-minded of witch stuff to enjoy growing witch plants, but I think he said he was Irish instead. How am I supposed to enjoy all of their suffering if their suffering is nothing but forced contrivances? Then the sage says Hilda's heart is full of ex-boyfriends and shows Sabrina a memory of hers where she was admiring a painting of herself. Zelda admired a painting of herself too. It's always nice to see episodes that mostly don't focus on Sabrina. Zelda puts her hand on Pierre's shoulder and holds his hand. She says it's not fair of him to go on dating them both. She should really be saying it's not fair of us because you only have so much money. It's nice of one of them to give him money. Zelda and Hilda ruin each other's painting portraits. Pierre hates them until someone loves them and offers them a lot of money. He's smart enough to agree to paint like this from now on. He walks away and the aunts assume that he's leaving them just because of that for some reason. Why would he stop dating them just because of that? It looked to me like they were just insecurely jumping to that conclusion. Hilda's unfrozen and summons a croissant and eats it. And Salem's thrown out of the aquarium and cries in front of Sabrina. Why even show us this montage if it won't show us what she saw? The sage uses a vibrating back chair, and Sabrina says she couldn't find one person who didn't get heartbroken. Why did she take so long to say there is no person who didn't get disappointed? She says there is no cure, but there is. Just drink a potion to feel better. I guess the idea is neither of them wanted to make a brainwashing potion. That must be what she wanted. Why does it say it's beyond even his powers? She was able to brainwash Quigley effortlessly. He should say, it's beyond even my powers to make it so that you'd never be disappointed again. Because that would involve changing all the events in your future. Maybe he should be written to do that. And then the rest of the episode would show her getting bored because she never has any real conflict in her life. And she's too stubborn to play video games. He tells her to help people to cheer up. He shows her aunts hugging after their earlier feud. Then he smartly gives her a card and tells her to recommend him to others. Chloe tells Sabrina she has a cool bag, and the story ends. This episode has Sabrina get constantly shown a memory of different people getting disappointed for underwhelmingly petty reasons, which are usually contrived. But it's not bad for being mundane because there's so much variety in what's happening that it's interesting. And the memories don't last way too long, and I never know what's gonna happen in the next scene, so it was always interesting. The moral that everyone's had a disappointment was obvious right away, so I don't know why Sabrina kept wasting her time. And it's not even technically true. Stillborns would still count as people who never got the chance to be disappointed. Good thing she went on to say that disappointment's a part of life to clarify the real moral. Even if a better moral would have been, you need disappointment or you'll just be bored. For once, magic wasn't demonized the whole time. Because magic is what got Sabrina to get given this experience with the sage, and while she was constantly disappointed by it, it didn't come off as outright torturing her this episode. She wasn't scared. Magic only worked out for the best, because she's happy to learn a lesson and feels better about what she was originally sad about. So at the end of the day, magic was worth it. Why can't every episode be like that? It's not enough to get me jealous of her because she still has a much stricter upbringing than I had.